Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is the first of my practice session series for the Red Hat Certified Specialist in Identity Management Exam EX362. Before I dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching, if you haven't subscribed yet, to click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do, so you know when new content is available. So like other practice session series I've done in the past, this is my final preparation for the EX362 exam. Generally my process is I go through whatever training materials, then do a little bit of individual prep, and then about not always four, but I try to plan it around 3 to 4 weeks before my exam. I'll do these final practice sessions. And the goal of these is to give myself an opportunity to either talk about the objectives or practice exercises related to the objectives. And at the end of the video, I will do a little self-assessment, and hopefully I'll feel pretty confident with the objective and feel ready to do whatever tasks might come my way on the exam related to it. And if not, I still have a few weeks to brush up on some knowledge gaps and such before I actually take the exam. These should not be considered tutorials, nor should they be considered training materials in any way. I am learning these concepts and such right along with you. I just happen to be close to my exam and am doing my little final preparation. That being said, I do try to have the information accurate, because hopefully at this point in my preparation I have not learned something incorrectly. And also I put these out on the internet to give you some ideas, maybe if you are also working on EX362. And by the way, we are currently in September of 2024, so if you find this many years in the future, EX362, if it still exists, probably is different than what I have. But I put these out there so as you are preparing, I might give you some ideas of things to practice. Again, these are not training materials, nor are they tutorials, but it's just the way that I'm preparing for the exam. I share it because it might give you some ideas of how you can prepare for the exam as well. So this exam is primarily around Red Hat Identity Management, which is a set of different applications, mainly around managing user accounts, using the LDAP protocol. I think it was, if I remember correctly, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, I believe, is what LDAP stands for. I've said LDAP forever, and sometimes I forget what the acronym means. It also involves certificate management. There are some applications that are involved with that. Also, it can be used for some secrets management, and you can use it for some policy management on Red Hat Enterprise Linux systems. You can probably extend it to non-Red Hat stuff, but of course on a Red Hat exam, everything is based around Red Hat. It is similar to Active Directory. Careful to say similar with that. I'll probably go into this in other practice sessions. It is not the exact same as Active Directory, and most of my experience has been with Active Directory, because you often see that in the world of IT for your directory services. And one of the challenges that I've had with preparing is sometimes like trying to translate what I do in Active Directory and some of the stuff that I know in Active Directory, especially around LDAP objects and their different attributes and such, and try to like translate that over to IdM. And there is a lot of crossover, but IdM is its own thing. It follows LDAP protocol and all that kind of stuff, but it might help if you're preparing for the exam not to like forget what you know about Microsoft Active Directory, but just kind of come to an open mind of learn what IdM is and how IdM does stuff, and think of it as its own little thing rather than trying to find a comparison for every little thing with Active Directory. So getting into the objectives, the first part of the objectives involve doing an installation. And I'm going to focus in this particular session on install IdM using either scripts or Ansible automation platform. In particular, I'm going to be focusing on the installing IdM not using Ansible automation platform. I'll save that for another practice session, because quite frankly, it's 10 o'clock at night where I am and I'm tired, and I don't think I could do, a huge video. But that being said, if you're familiar with any of my other YouTube stuff, once I get rolling on a topic, I tend to not shut up. So we are off to it. Now I have set up a little lab environment of myself of several VMs, and actually what you're seeing on the screen is a VM that I'm kind of using as a maybe jump box, for lack of a better phrase, or workstation VM. And this is simulating what I will likely have on the exam. Of course, if I knew what was on the exam, I would not be able to tell you because of NDA and such. But I imagine what this exam is going to be is I will have a VM that I will then connect to other VMs that are offering whatever services that I'll have to configure, troubleshoot, and all that kind of stuff. So I try to simulate as best I can. But of course, I could get on the exam and, there's a single server with everything. No way to know. So I'm going to go ahead and SSH into my lab IdM server. And I guess maybe before I did that, on my workstation, I've set up my host file to where, I can get to all my stuff by name. I've also went ahead and set up my Eddy account on all of these to have passwordless sudo privileges and all that kind of stuff, just to make life a little bit easier. One thing to keep in mind with IdM and identity management is this is baked into RHEL. So if you have a RHEL subscription, you have access to this stuff. There are other products that Red Hat makes, like specifically Red Hat Directory Server, which for the directory services piece of IdM, the Red Hat Directory Server product basically gives you some more features and such. And that's, I think, for lack of a better phrase, like specialty products, I think are outside of the scope of this particular certification. I think this is just about what is available to you as a part of a Red Hat Enterprise Linux subscription. So the IdM server piece, which, there's multiple pieces that can go into an IdM server. The one that we're probably going to be focusing the most on, at least in this video, is going to be the directory server. And the upstream project for that is the IPA project, which I should have refreshed myself on IPA. I think it's identity policy. Oh, I can't remember the A part, maybe authorization, something like that. I'd have to look that up. It escapes me off the top of my head. But the free IPA project is the upstream for the directory server piece of IdM. So to get started, I'm actually going to go ahead and become root because I'll be tired of typing sudo all the time. And we are going to install some packages. So DNF install, sure it's IPA server. Of course, I get to my final practice sessions and I start forgetting basic stuff, but I guess this is the time to have some brain fog. So that way, when I get to the actual exam, it's not going to be an issue. I'm also going to get IPA server DNS because this IdM server is going to be offering DNS services. It'll be a non-trivial amount of stuff to install. I could have just done -y, but sometimes I like seeing what I'm going to install beforehand. So what this is going to install is basically the free IPA stuff. It's also going to install the packages needed for certificate management, which includes something called CertMonger, which is a service that when you start dealing with certificates with IdM, that's the background service that will, I hate saying keep certs up to date because there really is no renewing of a cert. You just have a new cert reissued, but it's a service that handles that. It also installs Bind because that's what's being used for the DNS piece. And then, of course, SSSD and KRB5, which that's KRB5 is the Kerberos stuff because that's what a lot of the underlying authentication things are using. This takes a couple of minutes to install. One thing to keep in mind, since we have an objective of installing this, when I've done installations, start to finish takes about 15, 20-ish minutes. Now that might be because obviously I'm on my little VMs here and I haven't given these VMs a ton of resources because I'm not having to manage thousands of users and such with IdM for my little test environments, but I found it to be between 15 and 20 minutes for an install. That's important to note when you're preparing for the exam, such as the last one I did was one about the last exam I took was focused around Ansible automation platform, and one of the directives was directives, one of the objectives was to install Ansible Automation Platform. Well, that process, I think when I timed it, it was pretty much a 30-minute process. Kind of no matter what options and such I chose, it ended up being about a 30-minute process. So knowing that that was going to be a thing when you're preparing for your exam, I think that exam I had 4 hours. I can't remember off the top of my head how much time I have for EX362, but you keep that in mind, such as, you kick off the installation. Maybe there's some other tasks on the exam you can be doing while the installation is going on, and you can be efficient with your time versus just sitting there and waiting for. Of course, I would get interrupted by my own VM. Using Vert Viewer for this, I've redone my hypervisor, and sometimes if I don't move my mouse, I'm sure I could configure that to not do that. Anyway, when you're waiting on that 30-minute install or whatever to do, you can do some other tasks and be efficient. And I think it's important when you're doing your preparation, you go through the install several times to give you an idea of what that time is, so you can work well with it. So we have installed the packages that we need, and there's several ways of doing the installation of an IdM server, and the easiest, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, way. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to snapshot this VM so I don't have to download these packages multiple times. So I will be right back. And we're back. That way, if I need to revert stuff, I won't have to take the few minutes to get all those packages again. So at the very minimum, what you could do to install an IPA server or IdM server. Sometimes you will hear me use IPA and IdM interchangeably. They are not interchangeable because IdM refers to multiple things, but I think you'll get the idea. I can do IPA server install, and I can simply go through the prompts with this. Now, before I do that, there's a couple of prerequisites that need to happen. Technically, we need to have some service records in DNS, but since I'm going to make this the DNS server, I don't have to actually have that stuff configured beforehand. If I was not going to make this a DNS server, then whatever the DNS server that's going to be the environment that's going to be queried, you would need to have your Kerberos SRV record. So if I recall correctly, that syntax is something like _Kerberos dot _TCP dot the rest of your domain and the service record information, like the port that Kerberos is going to be on, and like 88 for TCP, and you'd want one for UDP as well as and then the fully qualified domain name of your KDC, the key distribution center, and other Kerberos bits. But that's not going to be the case here because I am, for this, I'm going to just do the integrated DNS. Now, one thing to keep in mind that I think is useful is as you are practicing these, do multiple different installations scenarios, such as with this, without this. So that way, if you, whatever kind of scenario you might be faced with on the exam for installation, you'll be a bit familiar with it. One thing that you do need to be able to do, if you do hostname-f, you should be able to get a fully qualified domain name with this. Now, there may be multiple ways of doing this. There are a couple of ways that I know, and they all involve editing your Etsy host file. I believe you can do 127.0.1.1 and do this, but for my testing of doing installations and such of IdM, it's IdM is going to expect an actual IP address because it's going to need to resolve the fully qualified domain name of what's going to become your IdM server. So for this, I'm going to do 10.0.50.20. If I can type and talk at the same time. All right, so hostname-f, and that should be good. And for our first install, we're just going to walk through the installer, and then I'm going to show you some parameters that you would probably want to use, some of which are required, and then show you the way of doing it in a script. So IPA server install. And we ask if we want to configure integrated bind, and we do. We want this server. It's going to ask us what the server host name is, and it has gathered this from doing probably not explicitly hostname -f, but it's figured out the fully qualified domain name. It's going to ask what the domain name is. It's going to ask for the realm. Realm and domain are different. Now, they typically share a name, and the difference being the realm is in all caps, but the domain name actually refers to the DNS zone that's going to be made for this. The realm refers to the Kerberos piece of this, which, all of your LDAP objects and such are basically going to be principals within Kerberos or accounts within Kerberos. So that's why I have to provide the realm name. I can't think of a reason to not have these the same. And as a matter of fact, even though I think this is outside the scope of the objectives, if you look at the Red Hat documentation for IdM, as well as just general documentation for trying to get your Linux machines to join an Active Directory domain, you are, for the Active Directory piece, you're going to have realm name and domain name be the same. So I would keep that as the same there. We have to give this a directory manager password, and directory manager, it's an object within LDAP. It'll be I'm pretty sure it's a principal within Kerberos, but it's almost like a super user, but it is some things that are specific for the directory piece of IdM. And there are a couple of things that you will find yourself needing to do that involve needing to use the directory manager identity. This is different than just the admin account that is made as a part of this process, which is kind of analogous to your domain admin in an Active Directory environment. So I'm going to feed this a password. And then IPA admin, this is an account named admin. And it's going to ask us if we want to configure DNS forwarders. The answer to this is going to be yes, because this is likely not going to be a recursive DNS server for all of the internet. And so for queries that it's not going to know about, you will forward that to a different DNS server. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to for this. And it will try to figure out forwarders based off of your etcresolve.conf, which this 10.0.40.3 is the DNS server in my lab environment. And we can either keep that or we can tell it no and use different forwarders. I'm just going to press enter because that is the DNS server I want to use for that. We can add other forwarders if we want. I'm going to press enter to skip. It's going to ask us if we want to, if we're missing a reverse zone, and if we want to make a reverse zone for the IP address of the IdM server. And in this case, we do want it to make a reverse zone for us. We have to make sure this is correct, and this would be the proper NAD or ARPA zone for the 10.0.50.0/24 network. NetBIOS, which I have not seen it used for NetBIOS and IdM so far. This is probably a thing to make sure things play nice with Windows, not Windows, but Microsoft Active Directory. Do we want to tell it a particular NTP server to use or pool address? I'm going to choose no for that. We're just going to use the NTP server that this VM is automatically talking to, which I think is whatever Red Hat's NTP server is. And then a very common thing, or at least I say very common, I've done it several times, is to sleepwalk your way through this installation process and just press enter, which is going to stop everything and you get to start over, because it's asking you if you want to configure the system with these values, and the default is no for this. So we're going to say yes, and there it goes. And again, this is going to take about 15 minutes or so, maybe 20. I think closer to 15 if I recall right. So I'm going to pause the video, and once the installation is finished, we will continue. All right, and we're back. I didn't take note of the time that it started, so it seems like it's been about 10 minutes. So maybe I had been incorrect with how long it takes to do an install, but it's not instantaneous regardless. Now, one nice thing at the end of this is it will tell you about ports need to be opened, which we actually did not do this already. A lot of times I will want to have that done before I do the install, but we can do it now. Now, you can do the individual ports, or you can do some of the FirewallD services for this. And the services are FreeIPA LDAP and FreeIPA LDAP-S. And see if I can remember my command here. Firewall, I think it's not list service, because that's the ones that you have installed. I'll just use tab completion. This is what happens when you do this too late at night. 2 dashes. All right, is it info service? Yeah, that's it. So FreeIPA LDAP is going to basically do everything that you need except for DNS. So we can, and then there's the LDAP-S version. Take a look at that, which is basically the same thing, except you get 636 for what would be actual LDAP. So we'll do firewall cmd add service FreeIPA LDAP. We'll do the same thing for LDAP-S, and we'll do the same for DNS. Typically in production environments, I will actually do port numbers instead of the services, but this will work just the same. Now, in the past, you would have to do firewall command reload, or you would have to do these same configurations with -- permanent and reload. Something I've learned recently is this little command. I'm not sure if this is new to FirewallD for RHEL 9, but you do this runtime to permanent. And that's the same as doing all the add service commands as -- permanent and then doing reload. So we have all of our firewall rules done. We have the application installed. We can do, or actually one of the first things it wants us to do is see if we can get a Kerberos ticket. I think that was one of the things. Yeah, KNet admin. Oops. There we go. Clear the screen. KNet is a way of getting your Kerberos tickets, and in my password there. And now I can use commands such as IPA server find, and it has found one. Do IPA server show. This shows the roles that it has. CA server, DNS server. It is currently the IPA master. There are 2 suffixes that it can, and the suffixes deal with replication. At this point, the GUI is available. So if I go to my, let me zoom this in just a bit. It's not getting the address bar, but the fully qualified domain name for the server, and of course I don't trust the actual cert. I could have done that, but we're just going to accept the risk and continue. We have the IPA GUI, can log in as admin, and we're in. And I'm not going to go through all the different pieces of this because the scope of this video is just doing installations. So that is your installation doing the guided exercise, or the guide for that. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit out of here. I'm going to pause for just a moment and reset my snapshot, and we're going to do this with a scripted installation. All right, so let's SSH back into our IdM server, or what will become our IdM server. And root again. Now I've already installed the packages, so I can do RPM, QA, and grep for IdM. We see a lot of these packages are already here, so we're not going to have to go through that install process, but the actual installation of IdM. So to do this in a script, you're obviously going to need to have this done in a way that it is not going to prompt you for any of your options. And there is a -- unattend option available for the installer. If I were to do IPA server install -- help, you will get all of the various options. And this one of the things I love about the Red Hat exams. I can deal with exams where you have to memorize stuff. I don't prefer them. Just because in the real world, the stuff that you're going to have in memory is, stuff that you're touching often. And in the back of your head, stuff that wasn't necessarily memorized, but you've been exposed to it, will be things that if a problem comes up, that's where your experience comes in. You'll remember where to reference stuff. But in the real world, if there's something that you don't know, you're going to reference it. Now, of course, you can't. You have to know some stuff. Yeah, there's some stuff that will be memorized, but that will be just a part of working your exercises and such. But I would not attempt to memorize all of these options. As a matter of fact, what I would probably do is if I were working on, let's say I had an exam objective where I need to write a script to install an IPA server with basically the same parameters that we just did one with, then what I will do is have one terminal window that has -- help, and then either another terminal window, or in this case, I'll just open gedit and basically write your script, and then copy paste to your terminal. So if I were to want to let me change the font here so it'll be readable. Okay, so shebang, bin bash, and we will start with IPA server install. We're going to do unattended, and then we're going to start basically feeding it different options that we were once prompted when we did the install. You can do the install without the unattended and just feed it options. That's perfectly fine. But if you were specifically asked to do this in a script, I would, if it were me on the exam and I was asked to do that, then I would do the unattended just to make sure that, when Red Hat does whatever grading script it does, there's no chance of anything being prompted that would cause that script to fail. So we'll just go down the list. So ds-password, of course, you can do the one letter if you want. We'll use the Great Monkey 123. I think that'll work for that. I've done these with and without equals, whatever. I haven't seen a difference. If you have experience, you might want to mention that in the comments if it has been significantly different for you. But for me, not so much. That / allows us to kind of skip multiple lines with or all of this be considered a line of command. So admin password, I'm just going to set that to be the same as the DS password. And of course you could set variables and such as well and feed values this way. We definitely have to have domain name. If I can spell, that'll be idm.egslab.com. Go ahead and skip my line. Realm, definitely have to have that. That'll be in all caps. The host name, it actually should figure out. We don't necessarily have to put that. Actually, we're going to see if it'll work without it. All right. Move this over here. Scroll down just a bit. And we get to the actual server options. We're going to be doing setup DNS. The other things we are not going to do. And then we're going to go, since we're not doing any special thing with certificates, these SSL certificate options will come into play. Like if you already have a CA and that CA is basically signing the cert for this to be subordinate CA, this is where you would be including some of that information. Part of the server install is that it's going to enroll the server itself as an IdM client. So you might want to do the -- make home dir. You can change this later on with using auth select, but for this I'm going to go ahead and basically turn on the making home directory. That way when you log in to the server, it will go ahead and make your home directory for you. And I think I told you wrong about the SSL certificate. That might be, that is more for the web server that IdM uses, that web interface that you just saw a moment or so ago. It's probably something I need to practice in other practice sessions as I prepare for the exam, is see if I can feed, make myself my own little CA, make a cert, and see if I can feed it that way. these are the options that I had confused them for, as far as if you had a different CA that this IdM server was going to be a subordinate CA for. And now the DNS options. Some of these should look familiar. I'm actually going to do auto reverse and just have it create the reverse zone, the NAT or ARPA, from figuring out the IP address. Probably on the exam, I would specify the reverse zone to make, just to be 100% sure it's going to do exactly what I want, such as forwarders. I could do auto forwarders and just figures it out from etcresolve.conf, but if I didn't want to do that, I would do this. And that should be all I would need for a basic install. Now, you would use the same command for uninstalling, which, by the way, if let's say the install gets botched, I would run the uninstall command before you try to install it again. That is generally a wise thing to do. All right, so I think this looks good. And so let's see what happens. Let me, might as well, I'll just copy it. Let's call this install.sh. Paste our little thing in here. All right, and let's see what happens. Let's see if it'll work. Immediate syntax error. Yes, I remember now. Remember earlier when I set my Etsy host file, I need to do that. I guess I could have fed it the -- host name and not have to deal with this, but go ahead and fix this anyway. Okay, I think that should be everything we need. Now, I just said a minute ago you'll want to run the uninstall command. Since this thing didn't even kick off, you would not need to do that. Also, you will find that the log files that are spit out can be very useful with doing some troubleshooting. That was especially true when I was doing the Ansible automation method of doing the installation. It was quite useful. All right, so let's try it again. All right, we did not get an immediate failure. That's good. And notice how it has not prompted us for anything. This should look kind of familiar, because remember that one of the last prompts was, yes or no, with no being the default. This is how you want things configured. Probably just figured out NetBIOS name. Yeah, sending it now. Probably just got that from the first part of the realm name. So again, this will probably take about 10 minutes or so. So I'll pause the video, and once it finishes, we'll come back. All right, so we are back, and it looks like it was successful, and probably should include this in the script, which I'll need to remember that if I have to do this on the exam, which is to do the firewall rules. So let me do that real quick. All right, runtime to permanent. So that's going to be there. We can test getting our Kerberos ticket, and it looks like that was successful. We didn't get any errors there. Another thing we can do, trying to remember, I know we can do systemctl status IPA. That's all the different services. I think is it just IPA service? Yeah, so that's the overall IPA service, and you can see it starting the others. There's another, there's an IPA specific command. This is getting a little beyond just doing the install, but something that you will find yourself using probably a good bit is the IPA help topics command. It gives you the subcommands. And there's a particular one I'm thinking of. IPACTL, I think is what I wanted. Oh, memory is failing me tonight. That's it, IPACTL status. And what this will do is give us the status of all the different little services, which you can kind of see that from the systemctl thing. But that was another way to see if all of your services and such are running. So for the objective, install IdM using either scripts or Ansible Automation Platform. Obviously didn't touch the Ansible Automation Platform in this particular practice session, but I think I have a pretty good grasp of doing the install and making the install into a script when I don't forget to configure the firewall as a part of the script. I probably need to use IPACTL a little bit more often to keep that under my fingers, but I think this would be considered a pass if I had to do this on the exam. So I hope you found the video useful. Again, these are not intended to be tutorials, but rather kind of give you an idea of how I practice and prepare for the exams, which might give you some ideas of things that you can do as well. If you found the video useful, make sure you do click like. Also, I want to thank returning subscribers again for watching another video, and if you haven't subscribed yet, do so and click the button, or rather ring the bell, so you can know when new content is made available. As always, thank you for your time, and I will see you the next time.